look at a few more of these slides, and then we'll go for a walk. It's probably the prettiest day of the whole year right now. So. And it won't be like this for much longer. There's a hair in my mouth. Okay. So, what? Oh, you got your key for Zenland? I mean, to read this out, 4 okay, good. We'll probably be using that lab next week. Okay, so when you're looking at a phylogenetic tree, there will be, at the base of the tree, there will be organisms with ancestral characters. And then as you get branching of the phylogenetic tree, there will be new characters arising. And those are called derived characters. So it's these derived characters that are most informative about evolutionary relationships. So it's important to be able to determine whether the character is ancestral or derived. Okay, so here we have the plant kingdom. These are derived traits. Here we have mosses. Mosses are, ancient plants, non-vascular, no seeds, no flowers. So they're plants, but they don't have any of these more recently evolved derived traits. And here we have pine trees. So pine trees do have vascular tissue, and they do have seeds, but they do not have flowers. And then when you get to the flowering plants have vascular tissue, seeds, and flowers. And the ferns are vascular plants, but they do not have seeds or flowers. So in this case, the mosses would be considered to be the out group because they do not have any of these derived traits. For instance, if you're dealing with animals, the presence of hair is considered to be a derived feature found in mammals. Hair and also the production of milk. The presence of lungs in mammals is ancestral because lungs are also present in amphibians and reptiles. Features that are shared by two or more species descended from a common ancestor are said to be homologous. So for instance, in the case of vertebrates, the vertebral column is homologous. That's an ancestral trait for all vertebrates. An example of a derived trait in the vertebrates would be the presence of jaws. In the case of plants, the presence of flowers would be a derived trait. Okay, so here we have a phylogeny of several vertebrates. So all of these animals are vertebrates. But the lampreys are very primitive types of fish that don't have jaws. They're jawless fish. And then we get the evolution of jaws. So this would be a derived trait. So all of these animals have jaws. And we're getting another derived trait, lungs. Then finally, here we're getting hair and mammary glands. And these are the mammals. Now the rodents, of which this mouse is a member of, also have a derived trait involving continuously growing incisors. So this would be mammals, obviously. Presence of teeth in fish, mammals, and reptiles is ancestral. And the absence of teeth in birds and turtles is actually derived. There are a couple of things that make developing a phylogenetic tree challenging, and these include the existence of convergent evolution. Convergent evolution occurs when independently evolved features subjected to similar selective pressures become superficially similar, such as the wings that you find in birds and bats. Another problem is evolutionary reversal. And this is when a character reverts from a derived state back to an ancestral state, such as the presence of frogs with teeth. That would be an evolutionary reversal. Here's an example of convergent evolution in plants. Okay, here in the Americas, we have the Cactus family. And cactus plants have adaptations for living under hot, dry conditions. And if you go over to certain parts of Africa, you'll find members of the Euphorbiaceae, totally different family, that resemble cacti. So due to convergent evolution, they have many of the same features that you find in cactus plants. Remember the eye vein plant that I showed you that has that white latex that oozes out? Well, that's a euphorbia. But there are certain members of that genus and that family that look a lot like cactus plants. This is a species of frog that has teeth. So this is an example of evolutionary reversal. So this euphorbia in Africa and this cactus in America, they have spines and they have this accordion shape. So if it rains, they can take up and store water in their stems. The leaves have been reduced, and it's actually the epidermis of the stem that is photosynthetic. And they have spines for protection. Here's an example of convergent evolution in some different groups of animals. So here we have a fish. This is a shark. This is an extinct marine reptile, an ichthyosaur. And this is a dolphin. Okay, so this is a cartilaginous fish. This is a reptile. This is a mammal. But they all have similar types of features, which allows them to be marine predators, carnivores. Convergent evolution and evolutionary reversal, they generate homoplastic traits. These are traits that are similar for some reason other than inheritance from a common ancestor. Homologous refers to similar structures that do have the same evolutionary history, such as the bones in vertebrates and leaves in plants. So these are forelimbs from several different vertebrates. And they all have the same types of bones in their forelimbs. They're all derived from a common ancestor. So these are all homologous. And these bones have been modified to suit the adaptations of these animals. Here we have leaves. And all of these are leaves, but they've been modified for different purposes. So for instance, in the case of a cactus, the cactus spines are actually leaves, modified leaves. And why do you suppose cactus plants have spines? Can you think of any advantages? Yes?
Like to keep you at feathers.
Yes, that would be a good. So let's say it's hot, it's dry, and you're sitting out there, you're full of water, and some animal comes along that would just love to eat you. But the spines may be a deterrent to herbivory. Also, believe it or not, the spines actually provide some shade for the plant. So they provide some shade and they also help cut down on herbivory. Here we have a pitcher plant. That's just a modified leaf. and that will capture and digest insects. And then the plant can get nutrients from those insects. This is the East Indian pitcher plant. There's many different species. There's actually one species that instead of using insects, it uses the dung from tree shrews. So what it does is, on this little lip here, there's a little treat for these little mammals called tree shrews. And the tree shrews will come in here and sit in here and eat their little treat, and then go to the bathroom in this little pitcher. So the dung and the urine from the little mammal provides the fertilizer for the plant. This is a Venus flytrap. That's a modified leaf. It's got little trigger hairs on it. If a little guy lands in there and touches enough of those hairs, it goes like that real fast, and then it digests it, and that's where it gets its nutrients from. This is a poinsettia, which is in the Euphorbiaceae family. And these are the flowers. These red things are just modified leaves. They're called bracts. So those were homologous structures. Analogous structures are similar in function, but have a different evolutionary origin, such as the wing of a bat and the wing of a butterfly. Okay, so these wings are all vertebrate wings. So these bones are all homologous. These wings are analogous. They have a similar function, but a different evolutionary origin. And then over here we have different kinds of tendrils coming from different origins. Okay, so here we have stipular tendrils. Okay, at the base of certain leaves, there will be these little leafy structures called stipules. And in some cases, the stipules serve as tendrils for climbing. Okay, so the bones are homologous, but the wings are not. They are analogous. The structure of a bird wing and the structure of a bat wing are very different. The same bones are present, but in the case of the bird wing, you've got feathers providing the lift for the wing. In the case of the bat, you've got skin stretched between the phalanges, the fingers, providing the lift. An outgroup is the lineage closely related to the in-group, which is the lineage of interest, but it branched off from the in-group below its base on the evolutionary tree. So ancestral traits should be found not only in the in-group, but also in the out-group. Derived traits would be found only in the in-group. So in the example that we used with those different vertebrates, the lamprey would be an example of the out-group because it does not have jaws. So all of these are vertebrates, but the lamprey does not have jaws. So in this example, this would be the out-group. Okay, so these spines are modified leaves. These waxy bracts are modified leaves. And this pitcher is a modified leaf. This is from a different family of pitcher plants, not the East Indian pitcher plant. This type of pitcher plant actually grows in Ohio. Are any of you from the Columbus area? Okay, up just east of Columbus, there's a lake. It's called Buckeye Lake. Ever heard of that? And there used to be a big bog there that had sphagnum moss and cranberries and pitcher plants and sundews, orchids, and all kinds of bog plants. And back in the 1800s, they decided to build a lake there. Okay, so they flooded the bog, and a little piece of the bog broke off at the bottom and floated to the top and became an island. And that's now a state nature preserve. It's called Cranberry Bog State Nature Preserve. And you have to either boat out or canoe out to it. There's a boardwalk there, and you can see pitcher plants and other bog plants growing there. This is the Venus flytrap. The leaf is, these traps are modified leaves. And these carnivorous plants, they grow in areas where the availability of mineral nutrients is low. And that means they have to get their fertilizer from other sources, like insects or tree shrew dung or whatever they can catch. Okay, so if you wanted to try to construct a phylogeny, of course, nowadays, they're also using DNA and RNA, chloroplastic DNA, and so forth. But you would select a group of organisms to classify. This would be your in-group and an appropriate out-group. Choose the characters that will be used in the analysis and identify the possible forms of the character. Determine the ancestral and derived traits and distinguish the homologous from the homoplastic traits. Now, when you're constructing a phylogeny, you can use physiology, behavior, molecular information, chemical information, as well as structural characters. this is an example of a phylogeny of dinosaurs. Okay, so here we're getting the appearance of dinosaurs with wishbones. Okay, why is that significant? Yes.
Allows a place for the breast muscles to develop in order to fly.
Right, birds have wishbones. Okay, so I'm sure you've all heard of Archaeopteryx, right? This was a famous fossil. It was sort of in between a dinosaur and a bird. It's basically a dinosaur with a long bony tail and teeth and claws on the wings, and it had feathers. So this was a clue that maybe birds descended from dinosaurs. But they couldn't find any dinosaur fossils with wishbones. And birds have wishbones. And then finally, they did discover some dinosaur fossils with wishbones. And then, I think it was in the 90s, then they found lots of bird fossils, dinosaur fossils with wishbones. So these were becoming birds, and those fossils were found in China. Okay, so here we're getting wishbones, we're getting downy feathers. The feathers were used for insulation, for warmth, not for flying in the early days there. Here's Archaeopteryx. It still had a long bony tail and claws on the wings and teeth. And finally, you get the loss of teeth and the reduction of the tails. And we've got birds. There are lots of birds. So this little branch of the dinosaur grouping survived the giant asteroid from 65 million years ago. All the other dinosaurs died out. Some of these survived, and now we have about 10,000 species of birds. It's pretty good. There are more birds than any other land vertebrates. Here's Archaeopteryx. Pretty scary looking. Okay. So the system of classification that we use today is credited to Carl Linnaeus, who was a Swedish botanist. And he worked back in the 1700s. In 1753, he published a book called Species Plantarum, which means species of plants. And this book had 1,000 genera and 7,300 species. And they were all given a Latin name, a binomial name, genus and specific epithet. And people were bringing Linnaeus plant specimens from all over the world. So a lot of the American plants, you'll see that after the Latin name of the plant, you'll see a big L. And that big L stands for Linnaeus. He's the guy who named that plant. So the first name is the genus, the second name is the specific epithet. So with this system, scientists throughout the world can refer with precision to the same organisms, avoiding the confusion of common names. 200 years ago, here in Ohio, we had a magnificent deciduous forest, and there were wolves and mountain lions and bears and bison and elk. The list goes on and on and on. But this animal that we call a mountain lion also has many other common names: cougars, panthers. The Latin name is Puma concolor. And this animal ranges throughout North America and Central America and South America. So there will be common names for this animal in other languages as well. Portuguese and Spanish and all the indigenous languages. But if you say Puma concolor, I say, oh yeah, I know what that is. Okay. They used to have bounties on cougars in Ohio. Cougars and wolves, they gave you so much for every cougar scalp that you turned in back in those days. Okay, how would you answer this question? Swedish botanist, Linnaeus. There he is. That was a young Linnaeus collecting plants in Lapland. I like that hat. Okay, so the biological species concept is not perfect by any means, but it's okay. So by this definition, members of the same species are able to breed with each other and produce fertile, viable offspring. When taxonomists are trying to develop these phylogenies, if you have competing theories that make the same predictions, you're better off choosing the simpler explanation. Okay, so there may be many common names for a single species, and those names might even be in different languages. Or you might have two totally different species that have the same common name. So that's why these Latin names are so important. Ever heard of Dutchman's breeches? Okay, if you go out into the woods around here in the spring, you'll see these cute little wildflowers. There's Dutchman's breeches, and there's squirrel corn. They're in the same genus, they're different species. What we call Dutchman's breeches is Dicentra cucularia, But it has other common names. Little boys' breeches, monk's hood, boys and girls, soldier's cap, white hearts, etc. But there's another plant that is also known as monk's hood. But it's a totally different species. And it's actually in a different family even. And this monk's hood is poisonous. This is the one we call Dutchman's breeches. They look like pants hanging from a clothesline. That's how they get their name. Okay, so this was an important book. He also wrote another book where he gave names to different kinds of animals. People were bringing him animals from all over the world that he could classify. And when you use the Latin name on your herbarium labels, you always want to include the name of the authority along with it. And that way there will be no confusion about what you're talking about. So for instance, spearmint is Mentha spicata, and Linnaeus is the one who named it that. The names of the authorities are abbreviated. So L stands for Linnaeus. This is Mentha spicata. Peppermint is a different species. And if you find a mint and you're not sure what kind it is, you can look in Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, which I brought with me today. So did you ever find a mint and you weren't sure if it was spearmint or peppermint? Have you done that? Okay, so let's see here. Mentha. Spearmint and peppermint are not native plants, but there is a wild mint, a native mint that grows around here too. So if you have this book, if you go to page 90, so the native wild mint is called Mentha arvendis. And it has the flowers growing in the axils of the leaves, little whorls. In the case of spearmint, the leaves are stalkless, and the flower spike is slender and interrupted. In the case of peppermint, the leaves are stalked, and the spike is thicker and more compact. Plus it smells like peppermint. Okay, so what's the answer to this question? Dutchman's breeches. Okay. Running buffalo clover is Trifolium stoloniferum. Stolons are horizontal stems that run along the ground and root at the tips. Running buffalo clover has stolons. And those are also called runners. That's why it's called running buffalo clover. Trifolium stolonifera. That's a federally endangered species that grows here in Hamilton County. And it was associated with the bison that used to live around here. And they had trails going through the woods, going to the different salt licks in the area, the little prairie patches. Okay, here we have the mountain lion, puma, cougar, panther, yada, yada, yada. These are the babies. These are magnificent animals, and they're great predators on deer. So this is, it used to be Felis concolor. Felis is the genus of the purring cats. And now it's Puma concolor. This is Homo Sapiens. Linnaeus is the one who gave us that name. And this is Gilianthus Tuberosus. That's called the Jerusalem artichoke. That's a native perennial sunflower, and it has tubers that you can eat like potatoes. Anybody ever eaten Jerusalem artichokes? You can buy them at Kroger's. But anyway, it's a native perennial sunflower. So the ICBN is updated every 6 years, standardizing these rules governing the naming and classification of plants. And they agree that Linnaeus is the starting point. And they revise these rules periodically at botanical congresses. Now, when a new species is recognized, a type specimen needs to go into a herbarium. So the author must designate a type specimen that is deposited in a herbarium. Jacob, does the UC herbarium have any type specimens?
I believe a few liverworts.
Okay. I think you think it would be possible to take the class to the herbarium for a tour?
I will ask Dr. Tepe.
Could you ask him?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The herbarium is now in a state of flux. It used to be on the 16th floor of Crosley Tower, but now it's being moved over to the 6th floor of Revachel. And Jacob is a grad student working with Dr. Eric Tepe, who's the curator of the herbarium. So a type specimen is also known as a holotype. These holotypes are the most valuable of all the herbarium specimens. Because botanists will be referring back to that, in the future. So Homo Sapiens, Linnaeus is human species. This is the only species of human that is alive today. Although in the past there were other species in that genus. Yes.
Do we have a type specimen of Homo sapiens?
No, I don't think so. Pressed in a herbarium somewhere. Although, one time I went to the Field Museum in Chicago, and they've actually got human bodies preserved in formaldehyde down in the basement of the museum. But I don't know if you consider those to be type specimens or not.
I mentioned that because I heard at one point someone was thinking about using Jeremy Bentham's body, who was the great utilitarian philosopher of Britain, as the type specimen for Homo sapiens. Funny enough.
How long can a body preserve in formaldehyde?
I would think indefinitely. I mean, formaldehyde is a really good preservative. Some of the preservatives that they use in the biology labs now, like ethylene glycol, things like that, don't really work very well. And the fetal pigs start to rot after a year or so. But formaldehyde is pretty good, long-lasting preservative. Okay, so when you write the Latin name, you should always make the genus, the first letter capital, and then the epithet should be lowercase. This is Erynchium californicum. Is a species of, it's called blue-eyed grass. It's in the iris family. But even though this is Californicum, this should still be a lowercase letter here. Now, if you're writing a report or a scientific paper for a journal, for references to more than one species in a genus, you could use the abbreviation SPP. Like, let's say we're doing a botanical survey of a wetland. And we go out into this wetland and we see dozens and dozens of different species of sedges in the genus Carex. Well, we could try to identify all those different sedges and name them by species. That would be the best thing to do. But if you don't have time for that, you could just put Carex SPP, and that says there's more than one species in that genus present here. I'll probably be doing that a lot tomorrow when I go to that wetland. Or if you know what genus the organism is in, but you don't know what the species is yet, you could just put the genus and then put SP. So that says, okay, I know I've got a species of fruit fly here in the genus Drosophila, but I'm not exactly sure which species it is yet. Now, in your report or your journal article, if an organism is referred to numerous times, after you spell out the genus the first time, from then on, you could just put, instead of Drosophila melanogaster, you could just put D. melanogaster. just to save type. The first word in the binomial is a noun. The second word is an adjective or a possessive noun. So Trillium Grandiflora is a beautiful spring wildflower here in Ohio. It's beautiful big white flowers. Trillium Grandiflorum literally means large flowered trillium. Trillium erectum, another species, was named by Linnaeus. So it's Trillium erectum L. This is Trillium erectum. It's also called stinking Benjamin. Some of these trilliums have a really bad smell. They're pollinated by little flies, carrion flies. Okay, so the answer to this question would be what? Yes, Linnaeus. Okay, here's another example of a plant classification. Do any of you like to use ginger? Okay, this is the Oriental Ginger. I think I showed you the wild ginger the other day at Burnet Woods, didn't I? I didn't? Oh, okay, I did. Okay, well, that's in a totally different family, but the pioneers used that as a spice as well. But this is the Oriental Ginger that you would use in Chinese cooking. So the domain is Eukarya. The kingdom is Plantae. Phylum Anthophyta. These are the flowering plants. Class, it's a monocot. Order, Zingiberales. Family, Zingiberaceae. Genus, Zingiber. So within that family, there are actually 48 other genera. Okay, back in the old days, the sunflower family was known as the Compositae. That's the traditional name. And they're called composites because you've got, it's a composite of ray flowers and disc flowers. And the whole thing is an inflorescence. The head is an inflorescence made up of dozens or hundreds of individual flowers. And now we use the name Asteraceae for this family. Asters are an important genus in that family. The mustard family, these were known as the Cruciferae. And that's because the flower has 4 petals. It looks like a crucifix. So they were called the Cruciferae. And now we call them the Brassicaceae. Brassica is an important genus in the mustard family. The grass family used to be known as the Gramineae, but now we call it the Poaceae. Poa is an important genus in the grass family. Ever heard of Hoa pratensis? Okay, that's Kentucky bluegrass is Hoa pratensis. Mint used to be the Labiaceae, now it's the Lamiaceae. Lamium is an important genus in that family. Pea family used to be the Leguminosae, now it's called the Fabaceae. Faba is an important genus in that family. Palm is now the Ericaceae. Carrot used to be the Umbelliferae because the inflorescence is an umbel, sort of like an inverted umbrella. But now we call it the Apiaceae. If you did use these traditional names, that would be okay. Because a lot of people still use those names for these families. Families end in ACA. So Liliaceae would be the lily. Lilium superbum would be the Turk's cap lily. Okay, so these are just some common names and where those names come from. So milkweeds are called milkweeds because there's a milky juice exuded from the plant if you cut the plant. Skunk cabbage has kind of a skunky odor. Sometimes the scientific names are the same as the common names. So for instance, have you ever heard of a hydrangea? Okay, well that's actually the genus, but we call them hydrangeas. Same with narcissus and coreopsis, vanilla. Names that indicate use. Daisy fleabane, gets rid of fleas. Kentucky coffee tree, seeds roasted for coffee substitute. Belladonna, juice used to beautify by producing pallid skin and dilated mysterious eyes. Ever heard of that one? If you take too much of it, it'll kill you, but I guess if it doesn't kill you, it makes you more attractive. So, because your eyes are dilated and your skin is paler. Come on, get out of here, feeding me that kind of stuff. And then you've got origin, location, or season, like spring beauties, bloom in the spring, marshmallows. Where do those come from? Come from marshes. Daylilies, flowers last just one day. 4 o'clocks, they open up in the late afternoon flower. These are just some genus names, and you can read over these slides on your own. Please do, okay? But there's a genus called Polygonum. It's in the Polygonaceae, which is the buckwheat family. These are the smart weeds, the knotweeds. And Polygonum means many knees, referring to these jointed stems. One of the characteristics of that family, I can show you today, is there's a little membranous sheath around the node. It's called an ophrya. Where a leaf is attached to the stem is called a node. So this is a node. And in some cases, the acria have little bristles on them. I'll show you the long bristled smartweed today. So an acria is a plant structure formed of stipules fused into a sheath surrounding the stem, typically found in the Polygonaceae, which is the buckwheat family. Some of the names of the genera have Aboriginal origins. Like catalpa comes from North American Indian name for that plant. Vitis is the genus for grapes. That's Latin. Names that indicate use. Saponaria. Okay, there's a plant we might see, it's called Saponaria officinalis. It's also called bouncing bet. It gives these pretty pink flowers on it. It's also called soapwort. And Saponaria refers to soap. You can actually use this plant like soap, it lathers. These are some common specific epithets. We're not going to read all these. You can read this on your own. But for instance, albus means white. So Quercus alba would be the white oak. Quercus rubra would be the red oak, and so forth. Canadensis means it's from Canada. Hirsutus means it's hairy. Fetidus means it's bad smelling. Floridus means it's flowering. And so forth. Vulgaris just means common. These are more of the specific epithets. So bicolor means two-color. So that oak tree out there is Quercus bicolor. The upper side is green, the underside is white. Altissimus means tall. And so forth. Annuus means it's an annual. Biennis means it's a biennial. What does that mean? What's the difference between an annual and a biennial? Claire?
Does an annual last one season and a biannual last two?
Yes. So an annual will complete its life cycle in one growing season. Plant the seed, grows, flowers, makes seed, and dies. A biennial takes 2 years. So something like an annual sunflower plant, would be an annual. A carrot would be a biennial, take 2 years. First year it grows leaves, and then it overwinters as a taproot, and then the next year it grows new leaves and flowers and makes seeds and then dies. So biennial. Perennials come back year after year. Herbaceous perennials are non-woody perennials, like poke, Phytolacca americana. When we get a frost, it'll die down, but there's still a big taproot under the soil. And next spring, it's going to send up new shoots and new flowers. And it'll do that for many, many years. So anyway, you can study these and learn some Latin along the way. Vulgaris just means common. Okay, I think it's time to go for a walk. So why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we're gonna